Hello and welcome to Fine is a Four-Letter Word. My guest today is Brian Fink, and I have to welcome to the show, Brian.
Party people, what's going on? Everybody who's listening to this, you're missing out on an awesome visual. Lori is juggling a cat.
Yeah, well, I am going to start putting stuff on YouTube now, so people will be able to see. I'm cat sitting for Lily in Richmond, Virginia this week, and she has just today become like, I have to be right in your business. So she's joining us for this podcast.
How wonderful is this? I will let you know, Lily, Cam is downstairs. Cam is my puppy. He's been with us for just under a year now. But if you do hear somebody who wants to talk or be part of the conversation, there are chances that he is also four-legged and that he thinks he has something important to say.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, you were saying something important before we started recording, and I said, wait, hold on to this. So typically when I start the show, I ask people what the values and beliefs they were raised with that contributed to them becoming who they have become. And you were telling a story about your grandfather and how he has affected your life and how the kind of person he was. So start with that, because that is really a cool story.
Okay, so as we were kind of having the pre-game conversation, Lori was asking me to bring you all into the conversation. Lori and I we were talking about things that are coming up this week, right? I'm excited that I'm going to RecFest, and I will be spending the week with some really great recruiting brothers and sisters, getting to further my mission there. One of the things, though, about this week that makes me a little bittersweet is it is the anniversary, the 42nd anniversary of my grandfather's passing, right? It's his Yortzeit in Jewish tradition. And we were talking, I waxed poetically about my grandfather. I had a very short time in the grand scheme of things with him. And I have a whole lifetime of his memory and the memories that he shared with other people. And it's kind of like, when you throw a rock into a pond and it ripples, right? And the effects that it has on the fish, on the algae, on everything in the pond. And I was sharing with Lori the story about my grandfather that so we were in the shirt business, and we were in the shirt business in Southwest Georgia. And there's an HBCU, Albany State University, or Albany State College at the time. It's now ASU. And my grandfather, I was talking to a candidate, and the candidate said, "You don't know me, but I know you." And I said, "Well, how is that?" He was like, "Well, you don't have a real common last name," and I said, "Well, yeah, whatever." And I usually get jokes, I get razzed about it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he went on to tell me, he was like, "Your grandfather owned a shirt factory." I said, "We didn't own it." Yeah, where are you going with this? And he said, "Well, he used to give my father, dress shirts, white dress shirts, at the beginning of each semester of school if he made Dean's List." And I was like, oh. And, I think about the mission that I have as a recruiter and as a member of the human resources community to make sure that everyone is treated equally and fairly. And that in a time, if you turn back that clock, that's a time in our country when Black and brown Americans were having to fight a second time and I don't really think the fight stops, but for their equality, right? Mm-hmm. I say the fight doesn't really stop. I was having a conversation with Rocky Howard. For those of you who are gifted with the internet, you can search who Rocky Howard is. I'll be speaking with her on a panel at RecFest. But we were talking about the plight of African-American women in America. And it really enrages me. It just eats at me that a Black female has to work twice as hard. Twice as hard to 1 and 4 times as hard as a white male to make the same income, right? Like, it's kind of disgusting that we're not doing equal work for equal pay, right? And it's not kind of disgusting. It is disgusting, right? Like, I can dig a ditch as well as anybody else can. You should be paying all your ditch diggers the same amount of money, right?
Right.
So this is a quandary that I've got, and I often go to the mat and challenge corporate America. I don't have to challenge it at McAfee, where I'm a technical talent acquisition partner. These are core values that we have here at this organization. Those are core values that were instilled upon me by my father and my grandfather and my mother, and they reciprocate through the relationships and through their actions. So that's what Lori and I were talking about before the talk. That's a lot of words to get there. I'm sorry about that, everybody.
No, I wanted you to share that story because I just thought it was so cool. And it falls right into the whole what were the values and beliefs that you were raised with. And clearly that is one that is very important to you.
Well, I mean, I'm gonna get a little tied up. If you're watching this, then you know that my eyes started to water a little bit just now. Um, if you're not, and you're listening, and you haven't heard me before, I think you noticed there was a change in my voice, right? Is that, you know, uh, I look at my dad and I think about the tenaciousness and the resilience that he and my mother have, right? My father is a serial entrepreneur. He is, uh, he gets back, he gets knocked down, he fights again. And I know that that's a lesson that he learned from my grandfather, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
That there were challenges in both of their lives that they had to punch above their weight class to overcome. And I know that my grandfather, when I think about what he did for those students, and what he did as in the civil rights movement, that I come from a legacy of having to punch above the weight class and make sure that things are fair and indivisible for everybody, right?
Hmm.
So it's a great birthright. It's a challenging birthright, but
Yeah.
man, it's a great birthright.
Yeah. So you mentioned your grandfather and your father were entrepreneurs, and you probably, I'm guessing, have an entrepreneurial spirit, but you are working for a big company.
Yeah, so real quick, McAfee is not as big as everybody pretends that it is, right?
Oh,
Like
okay.
I've worked for some big organizations. I've worked for Amazon and AWS. I've worked for Apple. I've worked for Twitter. I go from big to small and small to big. McAfee is about 1,800 employees worldwide, but every employee here is dedicated to making sure that you are safe and protected online. Sorry if I get a little pitchy, but I'm passionate about making sure that we are able to be free to be who we want to be when we're in person or online, and
Hmm.
that the other people don't create encumbrances or trouble. Not to be confused with John Lewis's Good Trouble, but create trouble and atmospheric kind of bad juju, if you will,
Hmm.
on the scene. But about the entrepreneurial spark, I've actually had my own agency, recruiting agency. I've helped people build their recruiting agencies. I've helped people exit their recruiting agencies. I've been a part of some really dynamic organizations that are made up of truly remarkable individuals, and I like to think of myself as a footnote in helping people go from better to best. Um, why I'm at McAfee now is that I strongly identify with the mission of keeping people safe where they go online. That was something, believe it or not, when I worked at Twitter, I was really focused, and I had the great privilege to work with a number of individuals that worked on preventing salacious material or child pornography from being sent through DMs or being posted online, right? CSAM. And today, I get the privilege of working with an organization that wants to keep families safe online. Again, I don't want to get too pitchy. I get
Yeah.
pitchy
Yeah.
sometimes. I'm sorry,
Okay.
people, but like we just launched our deep fake detector. Our deep fake detector can determine whether an image has been created using generative AIs and LLMs, and it's intended to keep people safe and online and to keep them from falling from these scams, right?
Yeah.
So I think that you know, I think there's a why that carries over whether I'm being an entrepreneur or whether I'm being an entrepreneur at an organization like McAfee. And I really think it goes back to what I just said, that riff about taking people and organizations from better to best, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's kind of the ball field that I play in.
I love your passion around this because talk to a lot of people and they work for entrepreneurs tend to be more fired up about what they're doing because they're driving their own bus, right? But people within corporations, especially bigger corporations, and I didn't realize McAfee was not that big, they tend to be there and they're doing their job, but they're not necessarily as passionate about it.
Well, so Lori, I think that the plight of the modern man is and woman and or just the plight of the modern individual is that we don't have our why.
Uh-huh.
Like when I look at some of my friends and I see them going to work every day and they're just doing a thing so they can buy things. And I don't mean to sound like Tyler Durden from Fight Club, but they're buying shit to impress people that really don't matter in the long run, right?
Yeah, right.
What matters is delivering that why so that you can deliver self-care, right? I think that's a big theme in terms of, do when we go to work, are we going to work in a psychologically safe environment where we can afford to make a mistake, right?
Yeah.
Like I made a mistake today, right? But I have a great leader in Rodney Walden. I have great support in Fawn Cole, who they like coached me through the mistake, right? It's
Hmm.
still a mistake. It was still a big deal. It's still dominoed in a weird and awkward direction, and it is going to affect people. I had people who created psychological safety so I could serve my why.
Yeah.
Okay. I think that I think modern individual is focused on the wrong things. They're not being seen, they're not being heard, they're not being seen or heard by themselves. Now, I am not a
Right.
psychologist. I do not play a psychologist, right? And I did not stay at La Quinta Inn last night. Um, the strong reality is that we come to a fulcrum, right? Like that tipping point in our lives where either we know what we're doing and why we know what we're doing, or we're sleepwalking through life. I do not want to sleepwalk through life. I do not want anyone that I know to sleepwalk through life.
Yes. And so since you mentioned it, what was the fulcrum point for you?
Um, I I think that I don't think it was a fulcrum where like hockey sticked in one
Hmm.
direction. I think there were little adjustments that were made, and then the rocket just went into flight. Okay, is my mother, my mom Lorraine is an excellent motivator. She likes to say, if you don't have something nice to say, don't say anything at all. She also likes to say, if you see a problem, bring a solution.
Hmm.
Okay, uh, in recruiting and I think that recruiting, I think I've always done recruiting, right? Like I was the guy who always tried to build a team or get people to be in the play or join a fraternity.
I was just going to say, were you the recruiting person for your fraternity?
I am Rush Chairman. Damn glad to meet you, right? So
I
I
just got
was.
that feeling.
No, I totally was. And for those of you who are listening, I popped my collar because that's
So,
what you do in the frat, right?
right,
So,
exactly.
I was Rush Chairman. Damn glad to meet you. I did that for 3 years. Really exciting times. Boasted really great numbers for my fraternity. Brought some quality guys to top Slun Phi, new chapter at the University of Georgia. Had some really rancorous adventures with the legendary Run DMC, Jerry Garcia band, just to name a little bit of what we're running with.
Okay.
And then, I think I always knew that I needed to bring people together. I needed to create community. But it was those little challenges and those little problems that kind of, like I said, put fuel in the tank and gave me the moments to explode.
Uh-huh.
I talk about my mom saying, look, if there's a problem, you need to find a way to solve the problem. Don't just bring, gripes and complaints, bring a solutioning to it.
Right.
And I did that with Jeff Audette at Vanguard Management Group, which was my first recruiting gig. Is that Jeff, to this day, Jeff teases me that I was a pity hire. Um, I came in, and it wasn't like, hey, here, I'm going to change the world. It was, I want to change this problem.
Mm.
And I wanted to make candidate experience better. And then I wanted to make client experience better. And then I decided that my mission statement was I was going to be the great connector. And it was all of these little intricate moments, um, and then falling down. Okay. Is that I suffer from generalizable anxiety, depressive disorder. And one day, all the Lady Gaga in the world, I love Lady Gaga. I think she's a great motivator of people. Listen
Yeah,
to her music and
absolutely.
listen to her plight, right? Um, all the Lady Gaga, all the Jimmy Buffett, could not make Brian a happy boy
When
anymore.
when was this, just to put it into context for my listeners? At what point was this, when you were at Vanguard? Was it before you started your career? Where
So
did
so
it start showing up?
it started showing up probably in '06, and then really manifested itself in '07. I was running pretty lean. I was running pretty hard. I was managing a team. I was growing that team. I felt people responsibilities. Uh, I, for all intents and purposes, I should have been super happy.
Mhm.
Okay, like friends are getting married. I met this girl, and I tell my wife every day, like, when I met her, I knew that she wasn't a girl. I knew she was a woman, and that I was going to have to level up who I was. All right. Um, Shout out to all you posers out there. You
You're
you
so
gotta
funny.
you can't just like have the fast car and the velvet jacket. You gotta level up and
Yeah, I don't
get to
think
where you're gonna.
those are the people who are listening to my show, but we'll set them up anyway.
Lori, it's all good. It's all good. We're going to set them up. We're going to call them out, right? Fine is a
Okay.
four-letter word. Poser's a five-letter word. No posers in the house, right? Um, so I think I went through that depression, and fell down, and then got up, and then fell down, and then got up again. I think that those moments of self-reflection and self-doubt, creating those challenges for myself, and then becoming an entrepreneur and going into business for myself and meeting payroll and providing for other individuals. I think that compounded it. I think it compacted it. I think that we all like to talk about how responsible we are, but it's not until responsibility is really on our shoulders,
Mhm.
that Atlas shrugs.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
to
Right.
Ayn Rand this.
Right. It's
Um,
easy to talk until you actually have to go through whatever that experience is, and then it becomes a different thing.
right. So, exited my company, uh, went back to Jeff for a year to turn around his recruiting practice. And I think that I was looking for myself, and I was trying to be happy in other people.
Mm.
That's a contradiction, right? Like, you can't, like, you can go to a movie and you can laugh at Adam Sandler and you can feel good for a minute. But until you get right with yourself, until you start doing some of that hard work, until like, I'm reaching across my desk. I've got like this sheet about values clarification that I'm working through right
Mhm.
now, to square where I stand on different things. I got psychological help. I tried to help other people get psychological help, that needed it or couldn't afford it, or were in a bad place that I'd met in like group therapy. Um, I really, I mean, I read a lot, and then one day I was listening to a podcast. I was listening to a podcast that featured Tim Ferriss. It's the Tim Ferriss.
Mhm.
I think it was called the Tim Ferriss Experiment at the time, and he had on Jamie Foxx. It was just a suggested podcast, and I listened to it, and I thought about all the things that Jamie Foxx had to come up against, right?
Yeah.
And then I listened to the next episode, and the next episode was with a guy named Ryan Holiday. And
Oh yeah.
Ryan Holiday wrote a book called The Obstacle is the Way.
Mhm.
And I really went hard into The Obstacle is the Way. Okay. Like, um, there are books that I keep in my office, and there are books that I keep at my bedside. I have, torn up, super annotated, super highlighted copies of The Obstacle is the Way, Ego is the Enemy, Stillness is Key, in the office, and then on the bedside, I have the pristine version because with my Obi-Wan Kenobi figure, that's kind of I try to emulate a little Obi-Wan Kenobi every now and then. Ewan McGregor and I,
Absolutely.
yeah. But the strong reality is through those books, through those therapies, through interacting with multiple people, through giving back to a community, like the recruiting community specifically, instead of trying to extract as much money or extract as much value or extract as much transaction, it really helped me focus that I wanted to, there's that book that's called Good to Great.
Yes.
Well, if you're surrounding yourself with great people, where do you go? Are
Mm-hmm.
you already there? Like,
Or
where's
can it
that in
get
the?
better?
Can it get better? Right.
Right? Like
So,
how much better can it get? Like, can it always get better? Is there
oh,
always another level?
so I think so I embrace an abundance mindset, and that's another thing that I think changed is that I always had a scarcity mindset. I was the
Mm.
guy who was afraid in college if he took off work from waiting tables or from working in a call center that I was going to miss that big transaction, that I was going to miss that big tip.
Mm.
Um, there's the fear of missing out, and there are a few. We can go down a whole rabbit hole about fear, right? But like,
Yes.
is that there's the fear of missing out, which I think propels a lot of people. But people like you and I, Lori, we are time travelers, okay? And what I mean by that is that we can look at the past and we can reflect upon it and we can see how it brought us to the present.
Hmm.
But if we don't slow down, we go past the present and we only look at the future about what we're going to do and what we're going to become, right?
Right.
It's awesome to be a time traveler, but live in the moment,
Right.
okay? Don't get stuck in the past, because if you get stuck in the past, you will not progress to the future. Do not get stuck in the future, because if you're only thinking about the future, you won't enjoy the present. You won't enjoy that moment. You won't do homework with your kid because you're too busy saying, I got to take a phone conversation. That's something that happened
Right.
to me this week is like, I have an 8-year-old daughter who is the light of my life. And she was struggling with homework. And I was on the phone with a candidate and I was like, you know what, man, I got to tell you something. My kid's having a little problem with homework. Can I call you back in an hour and a half? And they were
Hmm.
like, yeah, but that'll be late for you. It's like, I don't care. Like, I need to take care of this thing. I need to live in this moment.
Yeah.
And yeah.
And being real like that, the candidate probably respected you even more
Well,
than
so
had you not said that. But I want to go back to something else you said
oh
about
shit.
missing out on
Yeah.
things and being afraid to take off because you were afraid you're going to miss the big deal or the big tip or whatever. And I have that tendency as well. And I also have learned and am embodying this more in that you cannot miss what is meant for you. Like, it is not possible. It will. If it is meant for you, it will find you.
Okay. So I'm smiling ear to ear. I love that. You know, Lori, that's actually the story of how my wife and I met. Is that we met at a mixer for we met at a mixer that was focused on philanthropy trips, right? And we met, and I was playing wingman for a friend of mine because he had just gone through a bad breakup, and I was thinking that the solution to my happiness was him being happy, right?
Okay.
And so I tried to wingman and push her over there, and then a week later we're at a party together, and we were talking and we were like, oh, we have all these things in common. And it was like I was on this rafting trip and you were on this rafting trip, and what have you. Okay, still. And then the third time was 3 days later that we show up at this sushi dinner for young professionals, right? It was $50 all you could eat sushi. Like I would go, I didn't care about meeting anybody. I wanted $50 worth of sushi.
Right. Give me the
Right.
food.
So the thing is that even though I said like when I met her, I knew that I had to level up. I mean, she was that level of 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 awesome,
Mhm.
right? That it just wasn't that. But the thing is that the universe conspired and it brought us together in all these different instances. So
Yeah.
I agree with you on that. I just don't know that people are in tune with the universe, right? That they try to challenge it and they try to fight it.
Right.
Um, not to get woohoo on people or woo woo, but like, there was a great book, and I don't think anybody read this book because this guy screwed up.
Okay.
Did you
Which
read
book?
the book Will by Will Smith?
Oh my gosh, that's so funny that you're saying that because the house that I'm cat sitting in has that book and I was looking at it like, "Oh, I want to read that."
Okay, so here's the thing. That book came out, and I thought that, and I read it, and I was like, holy shit. Will Smith said everything that you want is on the other side of fear.
Yes.
Holy shit. And the whole book was about overcoming those fears, overcoming the demon who lived in his closet, or that he thought lived
Yeah.
in his
Yeah.
closet, or challenging this, or becoming the big, and fear, 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 and
Yep.
pushing up against it, right? I don't think anybody read that book after he slapped Chris Rock.
I don't know. I'm eager to read it. And since you brought up Will Smith and fear, I will put it out there that if you haven't seen the video of Will Smith talking about his skydiving experience, I don't remember what show it was on, but if you Google Will Smith skydiving, it will come up. And it is such a great lesson about fear and
I
also
mean,
hilarious because he is a very funny person. Um, but yeah,
oh, so the book's funny too. The book's funny, but
I
like,
bet it is. But
but could
yes,
you talk
this
about?
whole overall lesson, this key takeaway of that everything you want is on the other side of fear. And it's a matter of like I talk about courage is not being afraid. It's about being afraid and doing it anyway.
So I think that I would add a caveat to that. And the
Hmm.
caveat, like I've often said that responsibility is freedom. All right. I don't know where that came from, but like you can do whatever you want to do, but you also have to live with the repercussions of
Yes.
that thing that you did, right? Just like if you don't do that thing, you have to live with the repercussions of your fear,
Right. Right. And
right?
repercussions, or it could be consequences if you want a different word. Yeah.
Yeah, I thought repercussions because like we talked about the analogy about the water, the rock and the water and the
Yep.
waves
Yep.
spreading
Yep.
out, right? So yeah.
Yeah. So I know I got you off track of where you were, and we
No,
don't
dude,
necessarily have to
dude,
circle back to that,
dude.
but
I was like,
I
if you're
just
taking
wanted to jump
notes,
in with
if
that whole
if you're
idea of the
taking
whole
notes,
fear
maybe
thing.
that's where we're at. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, and so I appreciate your willingness to talk about the general anxiety
Disorder.
disorder that you've
Yeah.
uh I don't know if struggle is the right word, but that you've
So
experienced.
so it's a struggle because like I mean I go through um sometimes people think that you've got it all together and I
Hmm.
don't have it all together, right? Like
Hmm.
um I see a I see two therapists. I see one once a month, and I see one uh, probably every. We alternate between Mondays and Wednesdays, right?
Hmm.
So it's
Hmm.
like I'm trying to work that map
Like
out in my
every
head.
10 days, sort of.
Yeah, every 10 days or so, right? So we meet and we have that conversation, and we work through that. We work through that. Why are you afraid? Where does that fear come from?
Hmm.
How can you overcome it? Those are simplistic things that people think you do in therapy. Therapy is understanding, or for me, it's understanding why I react the way that I do to certain things,
Hmm.
right? Like, um, uh, I will refer to one of my doctors is Dr. Cassie. And Dr. Cassie and I had a conversation about not being picked for sports teams.
Mm.
when I was younger, and that maybe that triggered, or maybe that created the ripple in the pond as to why I really don't care about basketball,
Mm-hmm.
because I wasn't good at it. It was the last kid picked. How did it make you feel? Right? Doesn't mean I don't respect Kobe, or, in the Mamba Mentality, which is a great book. I read a lot. I don't watch a lot of TV, so pop culture references are lost on me.
Yeah.
Shout out to Benny Cohen for last night for making fun of me for not seeing Top Gun Maverick. I'm sure I'll get lots of hate mail about that. But he was like, Brian, you travel all over the place. What are you doing on the plane? I'm like,
Reading.
I'm reading a book, dude. It's like I got 4 hours by myself. I'm
Uh-huh.
reading a book, like
Yeah.
whatever. Um,
When you're reading
yeah,
a book on a plane, you don't have to worry about internet connection.
you know, if we all worried less about internet connection, I mean, the modern person, I probably have made this joke a hundred thousand times, is that all I need is food, water, and Wi-Fi, and food and water are optional. That's the plight of the modern man. Like,
Yeah.
looking, where's my signal? Where's my
Right.
signal?
We walk
Yeah,
around
yeah.
looking for that. But okay, I was getting you off track. You were talking about um
What
the
was I
the
talking about? I'm like,
gosh. Our
girl, I don't
conversation has
know.
been all over the place, but so many good takeaways.
I'm sitting here and I'm like, you got some questions. They're on your pad. Like, you
No,
ask them.
I
I don't,
don't. I just let the conversation go where it goes, and I
shit. All right, then,
I
then we're
jump
good
in
to
with
go.
questions based on what you say. That's how I run these things. So,
Okay, all right, so we're good to go.
yeah. No, I like I was saying, I really appreciate you being so open and forthcoming with everything that you've shared, and I love all of the book references because I'm a big reader as well. And yeah, so I know we could continue on for
So
at
so
least another
Lori,
half
Lori,
hour.
Lori, to that, I have one. I had two grandmothers. Um, I have one grandmother who instilled upon me, you know, to value your friendships and the communities that you create, right?
Yes.
And I had another grandmother who was very much about, you know, she was trying to teach me lessons about saving money or reading and what have you. And if you don't look at it as a dichotomy, but look at it as like that genetic fluidity, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and you think about that, is that both of them emboldened me to share a story, maybe to share pain, so that other people would feel comfortable being seen and heard,
Mm.
right?
Yeah.
I mean, like, depression is a real thing. I mean, look, I am not a social scientist. I gave that life up when I walked away from political science and what have you. But, like, you can't tell me that people weren't psychologically changed by COVID. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not talking about getting COVID.
Right.
I'm
Right.
talking about being trapped in our
Yeah.
houses.
That whole
I'm not talking
experience.
about the vaccine. I'm not talking about any of that, right? I'm talking about, do we know how to go to a bar? And I don't drink, but do we know how to go to a bar and talk to the person next to us?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right. And I think that was an issue before COVID, but it was exacerbated and expanded
Oh,
by it. But
COVID was this great accelerant, right? Like,
yeah,
it was gasoline on so many different fires.
right, right. But that challenge of being able to communicate and connect with another human has been there for a very long time. And there have been studies done on how many people are it today will identify themselves as being lonely, not even having one friend that they can talk to. Uh, I just find that, first of all, mind blowing, and secondly, very sad
Lori, I
and
don't
concerning.
find it I don't find it mind blowing. All right. I do find it very concerning, and I find it very sad. Is that we've got this thing where we replace real
Hmm.
with artificial.
Hmm. Hmm.
Okay. I'm not digging on Facebook. I'm not digging on LinkedIn. I'm not digging on Twitter. I'm not digging on the internet. But what I will say about this dig is that, Lori, you and I are having a conversation as two people, right? just because we're a friend on Facebook, and Lori and I are not friends on Facebook, it's not because I don't want to be friends on Facebook,
We just
but
haven't
like,
gotten there yet.
we haven't gotten there yet. But like, I got 2,000 people that I'm friends with on Facebook. I look at them and I'm like, I got like 10 people that I hang out with. Like I joked about Benny Cohen, right?
Mhm.
So like Benny Cohen and I went out last night uh, a Temple Brotherhood meeting, right? Or football thing, right? And it was great to just like talk to people and to have a few commonalities that bridge that divide, right?
Mhm, mhm.
But I mean, like, you know, I gotta imagine that loneliness is an epidemic that is just completely accelerated by this false narrative that we tell each other that we're like that I got 100,000 fans or
Yeah,
that all these people like my YouTube video or like my TikTok talk or whatever. Um, yeah, I think that
yeah.
the artificial, I mean, it's like Splenda. I love Splenda. I take 6 of them in my coffee every day, right?
Okay.
But like, but like, dude, it's not good for me.
Right. But yes, and you recognize that. And it's still, yeah. We can I have something
Go
I have
riff
some
on it,
no, no,
riff
no.
on it.
I have something that I want to run past you when we stop recording because it's not ready for prime time yet, and that I'm saying this as like a hook for my listeners. Stay tuned because there's something that is coming. I will share it at some point. It's not ready yet, but I want to talk to you about it, Brian, after we
It's a
hang up.
Splenda substitute.
It is not a Splenda substitute at all. I will say it has to do with gratitude and community. That's what I will say. Now, before we go, what I have to ask you, what is the song that you listen to when you need an extra boost of energy? What's your hype
Um,
song?
so there's a rotation.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's not just one song, and also for the past year, for those of you who are listening and you're looking at your calendar, we're taping on Friday, September the 6th. On September the 2nd, 2023, and this is 2024, my wife woke me up in the morning and she said, I hate to tell you this, but Jimmy Buffett has passed away.
Yep.
And I've seen Jimmy a lot. Okay. So like, you know, there there's a I mean like 10 cup chalice,
Hmm.
like fill it up with sweet red wine. So like there's Edge of Glory by Lady Gaga that I listen to religiously. Doom, doom, doom. I listen to that religiously. I listen to Jimmy Eat World's The Sweetness. I think that I've probably been kicked off of more podcasts for going, are you listening? Whoa. Then, but like, it gets me hyped up. But the one thing that I listen to incessantly before I get up on stage to give a keynote for a recruiting event is Coach Kirby Smart of the University of Georgia Bulldogs. Is that if you've ever been to a bull, I'm getting chills just telling you people about
Uh-oh.
this. Is that if you've ever been to an SEC football game, we
Yeah.
do pageantry on a different level.
Right.
Sorry to my wife and all of her constituency that love the Big Ten, but like we do pageantry. And after all the pageantry is done at the University of Georgia, and I'm not going to tell you what goes into it because I don't want to ruin a pregame for you. But what I will tell you is there is a moment, ladies and gentlemen, please rise. It is time to attack the day. And that is the voice of Kirby Smart. And he comes through those speakers, and then it is followed by Baba O'Reilly's Baba O'Reilly
Yep.
in
The song. Yeah.
Teenage
Yeah.
Wasteland.
Everybody thinks that song is called Teenage Wasteland, but
Teenage
it's not.
Wasteland,
It's
right?
Baba
But it's
O'Reilly. We'll go
Baba
there.
O'Reilly by
Yep.
The Who,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
But that moment, I have the YouTube clip downloaded to my phone so that wherever I am, if I don't have internet, right? Like I didn't have it in
Hmm.
Colombia, I can say, dun, dun. Ladies and gentlemen, please rise. It is time to attack the day.
I love it.
And that immediately, no matter what has happened, whether I've lost the laptop that I'm supposed to give the presentation on minutes before and nobody seems to know where the laptop is. True story, SourceCon in Dallas. And slides are jumbled. It doesn't matter. It puts me in a mindset that it is in fact time to attack the day. And it is not seize the day. It is not attack the game. It is not that. It is you have your entire life in front of you. Go get it.
Yeah. And on that note, we will close, except if people want to get in touch with you and continue this conversation, where's the best place for them to reach you?
Best place to find me is on linkedin.com/Brian Fink. I am the first Brian Fink that will come up in your search. That is the best place to reach me. If you want to go deeper, we can ride on the Peloton at the Brian Fink. We can, I mean,
okay.
we're internationally known to rock the Peloton microphone. Yeah, so that's
awesome.
it.
I will put a link to that in the show notes. Brian, thank you so much for joining me today on Fine is a 4-letter word.
Attack the day. I'll see you later. Thank you.